All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for real people, just like you, just like me. Pat Benatar, Neil Giraldo were on CBS Sunday morning. Now, as a habit, I don't typically watch CBS at all because the initials actually tell the truth. When you watch CBS, you typically see BS. So that's an old one. I'm here all week. Don't forget to tip your waitress. In any event, these two amazing people who've been married, I believe, since what, 1982, deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Their interview was great. The interviewer asked many good questions and just did a good job with the interview. And then we get to the question of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Pat and Neil, but mostly Pat, I think, answered and said that they don't really need that kind of recognition. You know, it'd be nice, but, you know, we love our fans, and our fans basically give us the recognition by being great fans, which I'm one. I'm a huge fan of these two and have been railing now for a few years on my humble little channel here as just wondering why have they been passed over. Now, they were nominated one time and they lost, and I believe that might have been the year that Stevie Nicks got in. Not sure. I have a theory, and again, it's a diabolical theory as to why Pat and Neil aren't getting in, and it might be because of Neil. Neil Giraldo, who's a terrific guitar player and really an innovator in that early 80s phase where there was new wave and hard rock and heavy metal. And he eventually got married to this singer who had this range that was just off the charts. I don't think anyone in the music business had that range at that time. You know, of course, you had Mariah Carey, Whitney Houston that would come along later. But Pat Benatar was singing hard rock songs and new wave songs, and she was mashing it together. And then later on, she would redefine herself. At one point, Pat and Neil would even put out a blues album, which I think is a joy to listen to as well. But my theory is that if it were just Pat and she was claiming, hey, I did this on my own, I'm a strong woman. And throughout that interview, it's clear that Pat Benatar broke so much new ground when it came to what she was doing that certainly based on influence, based on talent, she should be in the Hall of Fame. But she's got this battle axe of a husband attached to her. And the powers that be do not like that image. They would have had just preferred her to be like Stevie Nicks, where, you know, she was part of a rock band and she piggybacked off of that rock band and a man, but kind of left, kind of did her own thing without the man. See, Pat Benatar has been happily married to Neil Giraldo for many, many years, and that does not look good on a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame resume. It just doesn't. You know, minor exceptions, obviously Paul McCartney with his wife Linda, they really didn't care because it was Paul McCartney, and that superseded any long-term relationship that was successful, right? And Neil was very important at arranging and producing and writing and feedback and bouncing ideas. I mean, in the interview, they basically say, Neil and I took on the world. We were ready to take it on. And, you know, Pat Benatar talks about all of the sexism. Hey, come sit on my lap and maybe we'll play this record for you, which is just insane. I can't even, my mind just doesn't even go to those places. If that was actually occurring, which I believe what she's saying, if that was actually happening, it's just really pathetic. I mean, yeah, you know, was it a man's sport for many years for the most part? Yeah. I mean, you had exceptions. You had Janis Joplin. You had other women like Carly Simon, again, who her husband, her former husband, is in the Hall of Fame and she's not. So there is sexism there. It's weird how there's sexism there. And they claim to be like, okay, it's girl power, so we want to induct more women into the Hall of Fame. Stevie Nicks, I think, was an overreaction to that, based more on her persona than her lengthy achievements and catalog, because she doesn't really have that much of a catalog when you look at it, especially compared to Pat Benatar. But I think the reason that Pat's not getting in or hasn't gotten in yet is the baggage of her husband. And he doesn't have any bad baggage. He's just baggage. All right. If she had this story where she threw off the chains of the man, right, like Stevie Nicks did to Lindsey Buckingham, basically, and said, screw you, I can do this alone, I'm a strong woman, I don't need a man's help, then I think she would be a shoo-in, which is just pathetic. It's all pathetic. It's the more I look at the world today, I say, really, what are you waiting for? I mean, all of the Grammy Awards she won. And it's, again, it's her and Neil. And Neil has to go in to the Hall of Fame with her. That's the problem. He has to go in. He can't just stand by and have her go in and then Neil not go in. In fact, as the years have gone by, it's been Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo. It wasn't like that, obviously, when Pat was putting albums out. It was just Pat Benatar. And, you know, it's kind of the same dynamic. If Jim Croce were ever put into the Hall of Fame, and he should have been in so long ago. It's mind-blowing that he's not there. But his guitarist, Murray Muehlheisen, I think is how you say his last name, he should be right there with him. He should be right there with him. I mean, super talented guy. Both of them died in the plane crash. They both should be in the Hall of Fame. In the case of Pat and Neil, yeah, they are running around telling the world that they're a great married couple and they're a team. And I guess that doesn't make them, you know, fan favorites at the Hall of Fame. I don't know. They should have already been in regardless. And it's sad that, you know, if you're crazy, off the wall and do nutty things, that's a career enhancement. But when you stick to the job that you were doing for many years, you stick together through thick and thin, because obviously the industry around 93 said bye-bye to Pat Benatar, of course, like everybody else. Wasn't, and she had gas in the tank. She could still sing. She, I think, turned out a couple of albums after that and still sounded amazing, but the music industry had moved on. And, you know, now we're treated to just like Love is a Battlefield and Hit Me With Your Best Shot and We Belong. Those are the three main songs they play over and over. During the interview, it was kind of nice to hear Treat Me Right. I haven't heard that on the radio in years. And that was a staple of rock radio. Precious Time, Fire and Ice. I mean, Hell Is for Children, which actually right now, with what's going on in the world, I mean, that song has come full circle in kind of a new way. It was way, way ahead of its time, but I guess it's too violent. It's too graphic for rock stations or any station today. I think people need to hear that. That's like really good preaching. That's what that song is. So in any event, great interview on CBS this morning, Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo. Check it out. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Hello. I mean, this is like the most obvious choice. I mean, I talk about Blue Oyster Cult. I talk about Steppenwolf. There are a lot of bands and a lot of artists, Carly Simon. You know, there's a pretty long list. People send me the list all the time and it gets longer. And I say, no way, this band isn't in there. I don't think the original Guess Who is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings. It's not in the, hello, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Never mind, then you've got Bachman Turner Overdrive that probably should be in there as well. I mean, you could put the Guess Who, but you had these two amazing, never mind. I guess all the music that I love, right, is being ignored anyway. And now if it was ignored prior to its recognition point, where you've gone past that now, so now we've got to put people in like Matchbox 20. And I'm like, what? Why? You haven't put these bands in. What are you doing with those guys? So in any event, that's my take on this stuff. And Pat and Neil, number one on my list to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And yes, it's got to be Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo.